year and will do so in the years to come. We will invest money in pure military defense capabilities. I would also like to thank all allies that have made the same commitment and who have started to take practical steps in that direction. I look forward to seeing the first effect of NATO's stronger defense and deterrence posture going into the summit in Ankara. It is the only way we could keep the alliance and its defense credible. Mr. Secretary General, I would further like to recognize your active and effective leadership in recent months in forging consensus and mobilizing transatlantic and European support for Ukraine. The US-NATO weapons initiative, the Pearl, is a great initiative in this direction. Thank you for that. And I want to stress today that Estonia supports this initiative fully, and we will gladly participate in that effort. Estonia will continue to support Ukraine, defending their freedom. This year alone, we spent 0.3% of our GDP on direct military support to Ukraine. And our defense industry is increasingly cooperating with the Ukrainian defense industry. Ukraine deserves an end of the war, but we know from our own history that only a well-guaranteed peace can be enduring and lasting peace. That's why the Estonian government is ready to contribute with troops to a coalition of willing force to guarantee an eventual peace in Ukraine. We continue to participate in this planning. And finally, I would like to highlight that every nation of the world has a right to choose its freedoms, its future, and its allies. So does Ukraine. Therefore, Estonia will continue to support Ukraine in its path towards NATO membership, not only because it would be the best guarantee for a peaceful future for Ukraine, but also because Ukraine would make NATO itself much stronger and Europe more secure. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, we have a few minutes for questions. We'll start with Reuters here in the third row.
Thank you. Andrew Gray from Reuters. Secretary General, tomorrow you're expected to participate in the meeting in Paris, precisely concerning the security guarantees you've mentioned. What do you expect from that meeting? And can you just give us an update on the state of the process here? How close are you to having concrete plans, or will you be looking at options? Where are you in the process? Yeah. And then for President Karis, we're picking up some concern on the eastern flank that this particular effort, a possible mission inside Ukraine, could come at the expense of security on the eastern flank. Are you concerned about that at all? Have you voiced those concerns? Have you received any reassurances that the troops that might be needed in Ukraine won't come at the expense of your country and others on the eastern side?
Well, thank you for your questions. To start with your first question, this whole process started with President Trump breaking the deadlock in February by engaging in conversations with Putin. Putin was clearly impressed, all evidence has, with that we were able to come to the 5% agreement in The Hague in June. Then this initiative to send lethal weapons from the US into Ukraine, paid for by European allies, which we agreed mid-July, and the secondary sanctions the US announced mid-July and have now hit India, because India is still buying oil and other stuff from Russia and is not putting pressure on Russia to end the war. So all of this is clearly evidence that the US is serious, wants to end this. And what the Europeans did, starting in February, is sit together. And by the way, later on, other countries like Japan and Australia are participating in this coalition of the willing to see how collectively can we organize the security guarantees for Ukraine to prevent a repeat from the Budapest Memorandum or Minsk. And a big breakthrough, particularly when it comes to the security guarantees, was exactly 3 weeks ago, when in a phone call preparing for the Alaska meeting with European leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen and the President of France and others, the President of the US announced that he wanted to participate to be part of those security guarantees. Now, where are we at the moment? The Europeans, together with others, are, as we speak, finalizing at the level of chiefs of defense, the defense ministers, the leaders. Tomorrow will be an important meeting. So I expect tomorrow or soon after tomorrow to have clarity on what collectively we can deliver. That means that we can engage even more intensely also with the American side to see what they want to deliver in terms of their participation in security guarantees, what that will look like, so that collectively we have that dealt with. And that will be important, because if a bilateral or trilateral meeting would start to happen with the Russians, particularly between Zelensky and Putin, clearly having clarity on the security guarantees is extremely important, because for the Ukrainians, they have one overriding priority, that if this war ends, and hopefully it will end sooner than later, because we have got to stop the killing, they want a situation in which this will never ever happen again, that the Russians try to catch 1 square kilometer of Ukraine. And then on your second question, then I'll hand over to the President. I can assure you that the Supreme Allied Commander is also involved in all of this. And why? Not because NATO will, as an organization, play a role in the security guarantees, but we have to make sure, and that is why I myself and Sakur and others are discreetly part of all the conversations, exactly to your question. Yes, security guarantees for Ukraine, but we have to prevent spreading our resources too thinly. And that means that we always have to look what the impact will be on the NATO plans, the forward land forces, etc., etc. Over to.
Okay, thank you. Answering your question, first of all, we are all instant flank, as Mark Rutte has also mentioned earlier. So it's not only proximity of immediate proximity is not the issue here. And we know that modern weapons can fly very fast in other parts of Europe. And it's also hybrid war. We know what happened to Ursula von der Leyen, jamming of GPS jamming of planes. So this is another issue. We see that it's not only a really immediate proximity of Russian border. So that's our European concern. And I have to make sure that US troops stay here in Europe, not only next to the border, but also in Germany, in Poland, and in other places. And we discussed this with Secretary General as well, and to make sure to convince also Americans, and give us also time to build up our own capabilities. So, because this transatlantic bond is important, we have to keep it going. So there is a concern, but we are not much worried. So because we are all working on the issue, and I'm going to meet Sakur next week, and I also give this information to Sakur as well.
All right, we're pretty much out of time, but we'll take the last 2 minutes for the Estonian broadcaster in the 4th row.
Hello, Joachim Clementi from the Estonian Public Broadcasting. So the Hague Summit was obviously a success. 5% is an impressive promise, but now comes the hard work of actually making sure all allies follow up on this. We have an example from Estonia where we're trying to get there already next year, but the deadline further is longer with capability targets and military secrets for the general public. This is kind of a black box sometimes in terms of how effective progress are we making. So my question is, what is NATO planning to do to assure everybody that we're actually effectively meeting these targets at a timely pace and spending the money in the right place, buying steel and gunpowder, not just bells and whistles?
Yeah, no, this is crucial, this question, and we have to deliver on this, because the last thing you want is that by 2034 we are still on where we are now, and then in the last year there will be a hockey stick towards 5%, and you know you can never then get that money spent. So there has to be a credible trajectory from every country moving into the 5% target in 2035. That's part of the agreement, that every country will present over the coming time a credible path leading into the 5%. And what makes it somewhat easier, this is not easy, but somewhat easier, is the fact that we have these capability targets. So every country knows it is not just spending 3.5%, no, it is spending 3.5%, so that when the moment would come that Article 5 would be activated, that we all know what our role has to be, the Germans, the Dutch, the Estonians, everyone, where to go to, with what troops, what capabilities, etc. And that will also feed into the defense industrial demand. That's why we have to ramp up defense industrial production, because this is not only about men and women in uniform, very much so, but also making sure that you have the military output from our industries. That's why I was last week so happy in Unterlüss in Germany that this Rheinmetall shell factory 155 ammunition was opened. In only 15 months it came about. He promised 12 months, it was 15 months. It is still an extremely successful outcome that in only 15 months from nothing to a full functioning factory that happened. And we need this all over NATO, including in the US. Because also in the US they have to ramp up, as all nations in NATO have to do, their defense production. So that will be connected to that. But back to your question, it has to be a credible path. And for this year, very important that the non-2%ers, all committing to 2% this year, will by the end of this year indeed have reached the 2%. And they have all recommitted to this. Yesterday I was in Luxembourg. They did, but also the other countries. So I'm fairly optimistic, but I can assure you, I will press for this. And if I would one day forget to do it, I know there is a president in Tallinn who will call me and say, hey, Mark, we are on 5% already in 2025, 2026. Make sure the rest will at least deliver not later than 2035.
All right, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.